On that cool September morning, nothing foretold trouble. The Pacific Ocean fully justified its name, its surface smooth as glass. The sun was just beginning to rise above the horizon, painting the sky in gentle shades of pink. James Warren, as usual, was preparing his gear on the deck of the research vessel Marine Wanderer. His team, consisting of 5 experienced divers, was methodically checking the equipment. Sarah Chan, a marine biology specialist, was adjusted her underwater camera. Mike Peterson, a former military diver, was inspecting the air tanks. Rachel O'Neill, a marine ecologist, was calibrating instruments to measure water temperature and salinity. Thomas Rodriguez, a navigation expert, was studying current maps on his tablet. James checked the weather forecast on his smartphone for the 100th time. The conditions were perfect for diving: light wind, good visibility, and calm seas. The ship's captain, Old Sea Dog George McPherson, was leisurely sipping coffee from his favorite mug. He had been commanding the Marine Wanderer for 15 years and knew every bolt on his vessel. Early in the morning, the team began the standard communication checks. The radios worked flawlessly and the positioning systems showed precise coordinates. Sarah pulled out her worn observation journal, ready to record data on marine life. These waters were often home to sea lions, dolphins, and of course, majestic humpback whales. Within 15 minutes, the first group of divers, James and Mike, descended into the water. The temperature was slightly lower than usual, but that didn't deter the brave researchers. Visibility underwater was excellent, which pleased the entire team. Sunlight filtering through the welcome to spa stories, where the line between the known and the unknown fades, and the shadows whisper truths untold. Tonight, we delve into the primal connection between humans and animals, a bond forged in trust, sometimes fear, and always in mystery. Water created a mesmerizing play of light and shadow. Their plan was to explore a small coral reef about a mile from the shore. This reef was part of their long-term project monitoring the marine ecosystem. Rachel and Thomas remained aboard, ready to assist their colleagues at a moment's notice. Sarah, observing the water surface with binoculars, noticed unusual movement about 300 meters from the ship. At first, she thought it was the usual spray from a whale's blowhole, but something about it seemed strange. She immediately reported this to Captain McPherson. George, with 40 years of seafaring experience, sensed something was amiss. He steered the ship toward the disturbance while maintaining a safe distance. Rachel quickly grabbed a special hydrophone to record underwater sounds. A few minutes later, they saw a massive humpback whale whose behavior was clearly out of the ordinary. Instead of the smooth, graceful movements typical of these ocean giants, the whale was jerking as if something was obstructing it. Its breathing appeared rapid and uneven. Sarah immediately contacted James and Mike via the underwater radio. The divers stopped their routine work and carefully headed toward the whale's location. They understood the risk of approaching a potentially distressed animal of such size. Meanwhile, on board the ship, Rachel began preparing rescue equipment, special knives for cutting, and safety lines. Thomas contacted the Coast Guard to report the situation and request support. When James and Mike reached the whale, their hearts sank. Before them was a magnificent creature, entangled in a complex web of fishing nets, ropes, and chains. A massive anchor caught in the nets was slowly pulling the animal down. James carefully approached the whale's head, trying to stay within its line of sight. He remembered that humpback whales have excellent peripheral vision, and it was crucial for the animal to see him approaching. Mike stayed slightly behind, ready to assist at any moment. When their eyes met, James felt a chill run down his spine. In the whale's enormous eyes, he saw not only pain but also a clear plea for help. The animal slightly turned its head as if trying to get a better look at the strange being in front of it. James slowly raised his hand, showing the whale his empty palm, a gesture he often used when working with dolphins. To his surprise, the whale remained still, moving its fins only slightly to maintain its position in the water. 20 minutes later, the second team of divers, Sarah and Rachel, arrived at the scene with additional equipment. They began systematically photographing the tangled gear to better understand the structure of this deadly trap. Thomas, remaining on the ship with the captain, coordinated the team's actions and maintained communication with the approaching coast guard vessel. He also started drafting a detailed report documenting every action taken by the team. The first priority was identifying the most dangerous areas of entanglement using a high-resolution underwater camera. Sarah documented every knot entangle. They paid special attention to areas where the ropes had cut into the whale's skin. James began working on freeing the tail fin, the most hazardous part of the operation, as a single blow from the massive tail could be fatal for a diver. However, the whale seemed to understand the importance of what was happening and tried to keep its tail as still as possible. Mike focused on the anchor, figuring out how to detach it from the nets without distressing the whale. The anchor weighed about 1.12 tons and needed to be disconnected without letting it plunge to the seabed abruptly. Rachel carefully cut the nets around the whale's pectoral fins, a task requiring extreme caution as the ropes had deeply embedded themselves into the animal's skin. Fortunately, the Coast Guard vessel arrived soon after. On board was a marine mammal veterinarian, Dr. Emily Parker, along with an additional rescue team. They immediately deployed specialized equipment for lifting heavy objects. Dr. Parker dove into the water to assess the whale's condition. She found several deep wounds where the ropes had cut into the whale's skin. Luckily, none were life-threatening. The team quickly devised a clear plan of action. First, they needed to free the whale's head and blowhole, then work on the rest of its body, leaving the anchor for last. Each rescuer was assigned a specific task. The most challenging part was removing the ropes from the whale's mouth. James, the most experienced member of the team, took on this task. He slowly approached the whale's head, speaking softly to it through his diving regulator. Air bubbles rose around him, creating a surreal dance in the sunlight. The whale seemed to understand his intentions. It slightly opened its mouth, allowing James to examine the tangled gear inside. Inside, he found several thick ropes wrapped around the whale's tongue and palate, explaining why the animal had difficulty feeding. Removing the ropes from the mouth took nearly an hour. Throughout this time, the whale remained remarkably calm, occasionally moving its tongue to help James access the most challenging spots. Each successfully removed piece of rope brought visible relief to the animal. After completing the first stage, the team took a break to refill their air tanks and rest briefly on the surface. They discussed their next steps. They still needed to free most of the whale's body and deal with the anchor. The water temperature started to rise, making the work slightly more comfortable. After the break, Sarah and Rachel resumed cording the nets around the whale's body. They used special knives with rounded tips to avoid injuring the animal. Every cut required extreme precision and focus. Meanwhile, Mike and two Coast Guard rescuers prepared to lift the anchor. They secured special inflatable pontoons to it, which would help control its descent. Once detached from the nets, an hour later, most of the nets were removed from the whale's body. The wounds left behind appeared inflamed but not critical. Dr. Parker periodically checked the whale's condition, noting that its breathing had become more steady and calm. The most dramatic moment came during the anchor detachment. The team spent almost an hour preparing for this operation. The inflatable pontoons were in place and the safety lines were. Team held their breath as the massive structure gradually disappeared into the ocean depths. Once the anchor was detached, the whale's behavior changed noticeably. For the first time in hours, it could move freely. Its initial movements were cautious, as if it were relearning how to swim. Gradually, its motions became more confident and graceful. The team spent the next half hour observing the whale and documenting its condition. The animal began making slow circles around the rescuers, moving more freely and naturally with each pass. Its breathing had completely normalized. Then something extraordinary happened. The whale unexpectedly approached James and very gently brushed against him with its massive body. The gesture was so delicate and intentional it seemed almost surreal. The moment lasted only a few seconds, but it left an indelible impression on everyone present. Afterward, the whale performed a series of graceful movements resembling figure eights. It swam with astonishing ease, as if dancing in the water. Its fins sliced through the ocean with remarkable elegance, creating small whirlpools that resembled underwater tornadoes. Sarah managed to capture these movements on camera. Knowing such footage was a rare treasure, the team gradually began to distance themselves from the whale, giving it more space to explore its newfound freedom. They carefully observed as the animal tested its range of motion. Each movement became more assured and expansive. Dr. Parker conducted a final assessment from a distance, noting that despite the numerous wounds and scars, the whale's overall condition appeared satisfactory. Most of the injuries would likely heal naturally within a few weeks. Then the whale unexpectedly surfaced and released a powerful spout of water from its blowhole. The spray was far stronger than usual, as if the animal was expressing its joy and relief. The droplets, illuminated by the setting sun, created a small rainbow in the air. For the next 15 minutes, the team watched as the whale performed a series of spectacular breaches. Each time its enormous body leaped above the water's surface, everyone aboard both vessels was awestruck. The splashes reached dozens of meters into the air. Thomas, continuing his documentation, noted that such behavior was unusual for a recently rescued animal. Typically, whales try to leave the scene of such a stressful event as quickly as possible, but this whale seemed intent on expressing its gratitude. Eventually, the whale slowly swam past the ship, allowing every team member a close look in the golden light of the setting sun. Its wet skin shimmered with shades of gray and blue. Rachel observed that some scars on the whale's body were old, possibly from previous encounters with fishing gear. This highlighted the importance of their work and the need for more responsible disposal of fishing equipment. By evening, the whale began heading north at a slow but steady pace. Its movements were confident and deliberate. The team speculated it was heading toward fish-rich areas where large groups of humpback whales typically gathered. During the summer feeding season, the sunset painted the ocean in golden hues. As the team began packing up their equipment, James made a final check of the coordinates to precisely mark the location of this incredible rescue. Captain McPherson marked the point on his navigation charts that evening. On their way back to shore, the team held a detailed debriefing. They analyzed each step of the rescue, noting the most effective techniques and strategies. They emphasized the importance of staying calm and methodical despite the high-stress situation. The next morning, the team gathered at their organization's office to compile a detailed report. They carefully described all the methods and techniques used, knowing this experience could benefit other rescue teams. James particularly highlighted the whale's remarkable calmness and willingness to accept human help. In his 20 years of working at sea, he had never encountered such a level of mutual understanding between a human and a analysis of the recovered fishing gear. Based on the markings on the nets and anchor, they determined they belonged to a fishing vessel that had sunk in the area during a storm a few months earlier. A week after the rescue, a research vessel 50 miles north reported sighting a humpback whale with distinctive scars. Its behavior was completely normal. It was actively feeding and interacting with other whales. The story of this rescue quickly spread through the professional community. Many experts praised the team's exceptional coordination and the unique behavior of the whale, which showed such a high level of trust toward humans. For James and his team, this event was more than just a successful rescue operation. It was a remarkable example of how two completely different species could interact and understand each other in a critical situation. The coordinates of this site were later added to the database of marine rescue services. As an area requiring heightened attention, regular patrols began more frequent inspections of the region for abandoned fishing gear. The data collected during the operation also helped refine techniques for rescuing large marine mammals. Particularly valuable were the observation of the whale's behavior during the work on its entangled mouth. This story became a vivid example of how professionalism, patience, and the right approach could lead to the successful resolution of even the most challenging situations in the ocean. Each team member took away something significant from this experience. Even after much time had passed, all participants in that rescue operation still remembered the whale's gaze with a special sense of awe, gaze of a sentient being aware of what was happening and incapable of expressing gratitude to its rescuers. Remember, the next time you hear the rustle of leaves or feel unseen eyes watching, it could be more than just your imagination.